distinguished speakers. On behalf of the Global Network for Rights and Developments, I'd like to thank Ms. Eija-Riitta Korhola for hosting this event here today, and to thank all of you for coming. Today's discussion is very timely, as in January of this year, the Egyptian constitution passed a public referendum. This constitutional referendum was a good test for Egypt's fragile transitional period. However, two important political milestones are still ahead of the country, the presidential and parliamentary elections. What comes next will shape Egypt's political, economic, and social framework for the next generations. Egypt's constitution of 2014 has many positive elements, including provisions on fundamental rights and the inclusion of minorities and marginalized groups. It enshrines complete equality between genders in all civil, political, social, and cultural rights, and it obliges the state to protect women from violence. It also guarantees women's rights to hold senior governmental and judiciary level. The Constitution defines children according to international law as any person under the age of 18 and bans child labor. However, it is a challenging transition that demands compromise, vigilance, and constant tending in order to enforce this new constitution. Egypt's experiment in participatory democracy the last 3 years has reminded all of us that it is not one vote that determines a democracy, it is all the steps that follow. Permitting international observers to monitor and report freely on electoral events is important in building confidence in Egypt's political transition. International election observation plays an important role in providing accurate and impartial assessment about the nature of electoral processes. The Global Network for Rights and Development was among the 6 international organizations that assessed the Egyptian constitutional referendum processes in accordance with international principles for genuine democratic elections and domestic law, while recognizing that it is the people of Egypt who ultimately determine the credibility and the legitimacy of the voting processes. We have also observed the referendum of self-determination in South Sudan, and as well observed the election in Sudan and the parliamentary election in Jordan. This conference will highlight and discuss the findings and the recommendations of GNRD's observation mission to Egypt, and discuss the challenges that lay ahead for Egyptian parliamentary and presidential elections. And now, I have the honor to give the floor to the host and the keynote speaker of this event, Ms. Eija-Riitta Korhola, who has been instrumental in our struggle to promote human rights and dignity inside the European Parliament and beyond. Ms. Korhola is again nominated for MEP of the Year Awards in the Justice and Civil Liberty category. Congratulations. She has been a close partner for many of our events and in the drafting of human rights resolutions. Ms. Korhola, we would be very delighted to hear your views on the Egyptian referendum and your recommendations and maybe the European Parliament perspective on this subject. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Dear panelists and honorable guests, I would like to welcome you all to this extremely timely and important conference. It is very important that we do not forget Egypt and that we keep on supporting the country and particularly its citizens on their path towards democracy. I'm MEP, but I'm also chairwoman of a human rights organization called the First Step Forum, and I visit Egypt regularly and have also taken stock of its democratic reforms, particularly with regard to minority rights and religious freedom. My introductory remarks will be divided in a number of points. First, an overview of the changes in the Constitution. Second, the reaction by the European Parliament. Problems identified by international observers. Recommendations to Egypt. Recommendations to the EU, and conclusions. Let me commence by giving a short overview and of the events around the referendum on the constitutional amendments in Egypt. The voting on the constitutional referendum took place on 14 and 15 January in 2014 in an attempt to bring legitimacy to the political development since the July 2013 coup, ousting President Mohamed Morsi, the country's first democratically elected president. In the months that followed, there was widespread turmoil across Egypt, protesters demanding democratic legitimacy and a repeal of the articles that had Islamist undertones. The interim government's response was amending the constitution. Many, including Carnegie International and the Carter Center, have criticized organizations that observed the referendum for the fact that it would legitimize a coup and undermine a democratic process, and thus it would be a legitimization of an undemocratic processes in Egypt. I personally hesitate to use the word coup because I know that many Egyptians find it misleading. The EU agreed to send a mission to observe the referendum, even though it has raised concerns with the Egyptian regime. High Representative Ashton stated that ahead of the constitutional referendum, I would like to reassure that the Egyptian people that the EU continues to support them in fulfilling the aspirations of the January 2011 revolution. The EU agreed on the mission because Egypt remains an important partner to the European Union. The European Union continues to support the democratic aspirations of the people in Egypt. Now, what were the changes in the new constitution, and are they any good? Amendments to the constitution include more rights and freedoms, greater autonomy for the military, judiciary, and the Parliament's possibility to withdraw confidence from the President. Aram Online prepared a comparison between the current draft and the previous constitution, and I would like to highlight a number of points in it. Alterations were included in the parts on the role of religion in legislation, the authority of the country's military, the system of governance, rights and freedoms of Egyptian citizens. The role of Islam and religion. The 2012 constitution by the Islamist-dominated panel was criticized for defining the principles of Islamic Sharia law too broadly, and added Article 2019, which opened the door for stricter interpretations of Sharia. Another controversial article in the 2012 Constitution gave clerics a say over the meaning of the principles of Sharia. The amended Constitution kept the second article stating that the principles of Sharia are the main source of legislation, and left out the contentious Article 2019, which, in my opinion, is positive. Moreover, the preamble of the amended Constitution now states, "We are writing a constitution that completes building a modern democratic state with a civilian government," which implies that it's neither religious nor military by nature. On the military, The new constitution gives the military more powers, as a transitional article was added requiring the approval of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces over the appointment of the defense minister. Some say this may lead to the immunization of the army chief and the defense minister. An article allowing military trials over civilians was added in the 2012 constitution and kept in the amended 2013 version, though it is now more restrictive and specifies more clearly the crimes to which the law applies. This, in my opinion, is rather worrisome. The new constitution is considered to provide more rights and freedoms in general, with more rights for women, the media, and minorities. The amended constitution states explicitly that women are equal to men, allowing them to hold official and judicial posts. New articles criminalize torture, discrimination, and arbitrary forced displacement, from which Christians have suffered in times of sectarian strife, a change which made me, of course, very happy. It also mandates the states must abide by international human rights agreements signed by Egypt. The new constitution prohibits in clear wording political parties based on religion, which could impact many parties formed after the January 25 uprising. Most importantly, the Salafist Noor Party and the Muslim Brotherhood Freedom and Justice Party. This led to the listing of the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, which is also worrisome. On system of governance, the amendments to Chapter 5 give Parliament the right to withdraw confidence from the President, a right which was absent from the previous constitution and which is a positive development towards a system of checks and balances. The amendments also give the President the power to choose certain powerful ministers in the event a majority party in Parliament nominates the Prime Minister. The effects of this remain to be seen. The amended articles also give Parliament the right to impeach the President if he breaches the provisions of the Constitution, a power not found in the 2012 Constitution, and a positive development. One of the most significant changes is the appointment of the Prosecutor General. While in the 2012 Charter, the President was tasked with appointing him. The 2013 amendments explicitly state that the Supreme Judicial Council now possesses this right. The European Parliament also reacted to the new constitution with its February 2014 resolution. The resolution stated, among other things, the following. The referendum had a relatively low turnout. Criticism of the political process in Egypt, it stated that the run-up to the referendum was marked by acts of violence and the harassment and arrests of activists campaigning for a no vote. Such actions led to a one-sided public debate ahead of the referendum. The resolution also welcomed the positive elements in the new constitution, which included fundamental freedoms, human rights, the protection of minorities, the protection of women's rights. We, however, condemned the articles relating to the armed forces and its lack of civilian oversight, and the Constitution's restriction of freedom of religious worship to the followers of the three Abrahamic religions, as well as excessive force against protesters and the crackdown on journalists. The resolution also referred to both the Muslim Brotherhood and interim government as inciting against one another. It also highlighted the increased sectarian attacks on Coptic churches following Morsi's ousters and acts of terrorism and violent attacks against security forces. We MEPs also called upon the Egyptian authorities to fully and effectively implement the new constitution's provisions on fundamental freedoms, including the freedom of assembly, association and expression, and human rights. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry rejected much of the resolution, but it was important in showing that despite the fact that the content of the constitution improved, we should not close our eyes of the events around it. Based on the observation missions, we can identify a number of problems that occurred during the election days and in the campaign. First, the government clearly campaigned for support of the constitutional amendments, while other groups that campaigned against the constitution either did not receive support or faced restrictions from the authorities, including repression, arrest and imprisonment. Second, media coverage in state and private media was largely one-sided, and public officials openly took position for a yes vote in the referendum during our meetings. Politically motivated violence, intimidation and repression from state and non-state actors limited and conditioned citizens' political and electoral participation. The regulations on political campaign financing are weak and generally unknown. Political party affiliated poll watchers and some civil society observers were not allowed access to monitor polling or faced heavy scrutiny. Political parties and civil society organizations voiced a concern about inaction or selective investigation of alleged electoral violations. There was limited time and civic education made available to learn and debate the constitutional draft. The integrity of the voter list or registry raises concern among many actors, even though listing was improved from the previous times. The decisions such as enabling citizens under certain conditions to vote at places other than their place of registry was a positive development, but raised concerns of possible double voting. The range of 1,500 to 2,000 voters per polling station seems too high and led to two-day balloting and generated concerns about the overnight control and custody of the ballot boxes and materials. The ink applied was easily removable, raising concerns about its ability to ensure the principle of one person, one vote. The newly established electoral management body, High Election Committee, the judges of which observed polling committees lacked skills and experience. Lack of consistency in decision-making and arrangement of materials left issues to discretion of judges. The role of assistants at the polling stations and other electoral administrations raised suspicion because many hailed from the civil service. For this reason, the Egyptian government should do at least the following. The roles and mandate of the government need better definitions with regard to elections, and the higher election committee should take a larger role. All parties and civil society activists should have access to media. A more peaceful democratic space for debate should be developed in order to build trust and consensus in Egypt. Develop a law on campaign financing which ensures transparency on public and private financing of politics and elections. greater access to all stages and counting processes to civil society actors, media and parties. Great complaints mechanisms and procedures for the investigations and prosecution of electoral crimes. Enough time and instruments for informed voting as well as election planning and procedures. Greater transparency and independent audits. Lowering the numbers of voters per polling station and measures to reduce lines and polling to just 1 day. Upgrade the equality, which sounds silly, but is very important. The capabilities and technical support of the electoral management body officials should be upgraded and ensure the access of officials to training and creation of a code of conduct. I also have some recommendations to the EU from an MEP's point of view. If I have to choose, I will choose for the new constitution. It is important that everyone can live in accordance with their own conscience and lifestyle, without, of course, harming others. At the same time, I strongly believe in national reconciliation and the inclusion of all actors in political and public life. No government which is artificially sustained without wide-ranging public support has a bright future ahead. Egypt is the most influential Arab state, and it will be more influential if it manages to build on pluralism and inclusion of all political spectrums, people of all genders and of all ages. Therefore, EU policy should focus on promotion of pluralism in particular. I don't want to be too soft on the new regime. A lot of money has come in from the Gulf, but this has had no visible impact. The government and president have no policy, no recovery plan, no inclusion plan for the opposition, no health plan, no education plan. The only plan we have seen is an economic plan, but the content is quite vague. As the EU, we should focus on human rights and not fall into the trap of mingling in internal politics. The Egyptians do not seem too eager to receive European help, and we should not beg for it. The best way is on an individual basis, such by organizing MEP delegation visits and civil society trainings. Contacts between European and Egyptian NGOs should be promoted. I, for example, organized a youth training with the First Step Forum in November, which was highly successful. As for the upcoming elections, it looks like there will be no anti-campaign or real opposition campaign, which gives an indication that the elections won't be fair and democratic. There is an immense risk that observers will be manipulated by the Egyptian press to say it all went well. However, it is important we keep Egypt close rather than far and cooperate in a spirit of mutual trust. All in all, it is important that the Egyptians decide for themselves whether or not a result reflects reality, and we as the EU can only support with technicalities. Conclusions. The biggest problem with this constitution was that most people did not vote yes because they approved of the constitution itself. They voted yes because they believed that it would give Al-Sisi the legitimacy to crack down on the Islamists. The content itself should be applauded. The challenges ahead are basically the same challenges that confronted the old Islamist regime. It is inflation, unemployment, social stability. Workers across the country are on strike, including doctors, teachers, factory employees, which causes further concern. Egyptians are also faced with a new wave of terrorist attacks across the country that are supposedly orchestrated by Islamist loyalists. Dozens of innocent political activists and scholars are in jail for allegedly supporting the former regime. Many of these accusations are false and a freedom of opinion should be granted. It is very worrisome that civil society and young people are completely alienated and unrepresented. The majority of the people who boycotted the constitution were young people who want neither an Islamist or a military regime. They gave up and no longer feel that their voice matters. Universities are also finding it hard to function because there are protests all across different universities in the country, forcing them to shut down every few months. Everyone is now awaiting al-Sisi to declare his call for presidency, and he is likely to win with an overwhelming majority if he decided to run. However, there is much criticism over the expected declaration because of his military rank. All of Egypt's former presidents were from the military, and people seem to want change. The EU must remain a close partner to Egypt and support any government that comes into power. Otherwise, the population will become skeptical about the EU's actions. The same way the majority of the population is now against the US because of the perceived support for the former Islamist regime. With these perspectives in mind, I provide my support for balanced technical monitoring, which ensures civil society participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Korhola. And now, I'd like to welcome Mr. Ramadan Al-Shazar, our Director and Global Network for Rights and Development in Brussels. He's also the head of GNRD's observation mission to Egypt for the constitutional referendum in January 2014. Mr. Al-Jazar helped the establishment of the new regional directions for GNRD in the Middle East and Africa. And after successful work in Africa and Europe, he has become the member of GNRD Board of Directors in 2014. Mr. Al-Jazar will give us a closer look on GNRD's mission and its findings and recommendations. Please go on.
شكرا علاء. أتقدم بالشكر للسيدة الأولى على استضافتها لهذه الندوة وحضورها مهم ويثري عنوان الندوة. لن نتكلم في الشق السياسي أو كما هو مسموح لها كعضو برلمان أن تتدخل وتفند ولها الحق في أن تصف وتتبنى بعض المصطلحات ممكن أن لا تروق مع جزء كبير من أبناء الشعب المصري من خلال ثورة عليه. سأتكلم في الشق التقني فيما يتعلق بالمراقبة الدولية ودورها في إعطاء مصداقية أو شرعية للعملية الانتخابية أو الاستفتائية بشكل عام وبشكل خاص في مصر. عندما بدأت التحضيرات من قبل الدولة المصرية لعملية الاستفتاء على تعديل الدستور، قدمنا مثل العديد من المنظمات الدولية وفتحت اللجنة العليا للانتخابات في مصر الباب للمنظمات الدولية والمحلية للقيام بعمليات المتابعة ومراقبة الاستفتاء والانتخابات البرلمانية نقطة. ولم يكن هناك ذكر الانتخابات الرئاسية في شهر نوفمبر 2013. وكانت الشبكة الدولية إحدى 6 منظمات دولية تم الموافقة على طلبها من قبل اللجنة العليا للانتخابات المصرية، إضافة إلى مركز كارتر والمعهد الديمقراطي الانتخابي المستدام في أفريقيا والديمقراطية الدولية ومنظمة الشفافية الدولية وشبكة الانتخابات في العالم العربي. فبعد اعتمادنا من قبل اللجنة العليا للانتخابات مباشرة كشبكة دولية لحقوق التنمية، قمنا بإرسال وفد على أعلى مستوى من الشبكة في نهاية شهر ديسمبر. وقام الوفد بالاشتراك مع الشريك المحلي منظمة ماعد ببث عملية تدريب إلى المراقبين المحليين والقيام بعملية نشر قوائم المراقبين عبر المحافظات. وأيضا قام الوفد بالتواصل مع كثير من ألوان الطيف السياسي المصري ومنظمات المجتمع المدني والجهة الرسمية المستقبلة للمنظمات الدولية، وتقريبا تم تسخير كثير من العقبات. وهنا أسجل الشكر إلى الدولة المصرية والمجتمع المدني المصري للتعاطي معنا كمراقبين دوليين رغم تخوفنا الشديد لما توصلنا إليه أو لما وصلنا قبل وصولنا إلى مصر عبر وسائل الإعلام من حالة رعب وحالة خوف أثرت على نفسية بعض المراقبين، وخاصة أننا قدمنا من 15 جنسية مختلفة ومعظمنا جنسيات أوروبية. إلى أن وصلنا إلى يوم الاستفتاء أو أيام الاستفتاء 14 و15 جانيوري. نشرت الشبكة الدولية للحقوق والتنمية إلى جانب شريكها المحلي مؤسسة ماعد 1204 من المراقبين المعتمدين في 23 محافظة من أصل 27 محافظة في مصر، لكي تشاهد وتراقب جميع مراحل اليومين من الاقتراع بما في ذلك إجراء التصويت، فرز الأصوات، وشمل كما أسلفت وفد المنظمة أو الشبكة الدولية خبراء إقليميين وخبراء في التنمية السياسية ومهنيين من 15 دولة. الشبكة الدولية للحقوق والتنمية هي أحد الموقعين على إعلان مبادئ المراقبة الدولية للانتخابات ومدونة السلوك ومدونة قواعد السلوك لمراقبي الانتخابات الدولية، وأجرت مهمتها وفقا لهذه المبادئ، والتي تنص على وجوب أن يكون مراقبي الانتخابات مستقلين ومحايدين، كما يجب أن يكونوا متمسكين أو محترمين للقيم بالحكم الديمقراطي واحترام السيادة الوطنية للدولة المضيفة وفقا لإعلان المبادئ. وشهد مراقبو الشبكة الدولية للحقوق والتنمية جميع مراحل الاستفتاء بما في ذلك الإطار القانوني والبيئة السياسية للاستفتاء وإجراءات الاقتراع والفرز في يومي الاستفتاء. استخدمت الشبكة بعثة مراقبة عمليات مبتكرة لجمع المعلومات من جميع أنحاء البلاد في أيام الاقتراع، حيث قمنا أو قامت فرقنا بتسجيل ملاحظاتهم عبر قائمة المراجعة التي يحملها كل مراقب، ويملأ استمارة فحص ومتابعة ترتيبات الاستفتاء طبقا لمعايير مفوضية الأمم المتحدة لحقوق الإنسان، مع الأخذ بعين الاعتبار طبيعة الأوضاع في مصر. ولقد تضمنت الاستمارة 3 أقسام رئيسية، تناول القسم الأول منها تقييم مراكز الاقتراع، بينما تناول القسم الثاني تقييم إجراءات التصويت، والقسم الأخير إدارة عملية التصويت بشكل تام. يقوم كل مراقب بإرسال الاستمارة للمحللين في مقر البعثة في مصر بشكل فوري. كان لدينا وفد عمليات، وهذا مكن بعثة المراقبة من تلقي المعلومات من الفرق المنتشرة في المحافظات تقريبا في الوقت الحقيقي أو بسرعة خارقة. سهل هذا الأسلوب لجمع البيانات المهمة لتحليل نتائج المراقبة بأكبر سرعة ممكنة أكثر مما كان في الماضي. بعد انتهاء اليوم الثاني للاستفتاء قمنا بتقديم تقرير أولي وتسليمه للهيئة العليا للانتخابات في مصر، وقمنا بالإعلان عنه في مؤتمر صحفي مفتوح إلى كل الإعلام الغربي والمحلي. سجلنا فيه بكل شفافية كل الملاحظات، وهي نفسها الملاحظات التي رفعناها للدولة المصرية، وأذكر منها بعض النقاط. سجلنا 7% من بطاقات الاقتراع التي لم تكن منبورة بخاتم اللجنة العليا للانتخابات. سجلنا أيضا 3% من مراكز الاقتراع لم تكن متقاربة جغرافيا. سجلنا أيضا 5% من مراكز الاقتراع لم تكن مزودة بلوحات تعليمات التصويت. 8% من مراكز الاقتراع غير كافية لتحقيق استمرارية الاقتراع من حيث الستائر ومؤشرات التصويت. 2% من المسؤولين عن إدارة الاقتراع رئيس لجنة أو أمين لجنة لم يقوموا بدورهم على أكمل وجه. 8% من الاقتراع من مراكز الاقتراع نلاحظ بها وجود عناصر أمن داخل مركز الاقتراع. نقول داخل مركز الاقتراع ولكن ليس داخل اللجنة. كل هذه الأخطاء لم تأخذ حيز يتجاوز 4% من الخطأ. لذلك اعتبرنا الشبكة الدولية للحقوق والتنمية أن عملية الاستفتاء في مصر من وجهة نظرنا كمراقبين دوليين استوفت المعايير الدولية، وكل هذه الملاحظات سلمناها اللجنة العليا للانتخابات في مصر من أجل تحسين أداء اللجنة العليا للانتخابات في المرات القادمة، وهذه نسبة الخطأ لم تؤثر على النتائج الفعلية التي وصلت لها اللجنة العليا للانتخابات بعد عملية الفرز. سجلنا بعض الانتهاكات التي لا تأخذ شكل انتهاكات، بما معنى الشعب المصري شعب يحب الحياة، فمراقبون دوليين سجلوا تجمعات لبعض جماهير مصرية تهتف وتغني أمام مراكز الاقتراع. ومثلما ذكرت السيدة كورهولا أن الشعب المصري كان يبحث عن التخلص من الحكم السابق أو الحكم الإسلامي. ممكن أن أخرج عن دوري كمراقب دولي وأتفق معها في هذه النقطة. أقمنا في مصر لمدة 3 أسابيع وقمنا بالتواصل مع الإعلام، وهنا أحيي الشعب المصري أننا أكملنا عملنا كمراقبين دوليين بعد 3 أسابيع. لم نسجل أي اعتداء على أحد مراقبينا، ولم نسجل أي منع لأحد مراقبينا من مزاولة عمله قبل وأثناء وبعد انتهاء العملية الاستفتائية. تمكن المراقبون الدوليون للشبكة الدولية للحقوق والتنمية من دخول كل مراكز الاقتراع واللجان التي وصلنا إليها. تأخرت بعض طواقم المراقبة للشبكة الدولية للحقوق والتنمية من الوصول لعمليات خارجة عن الثقافة في المراقبة، حيث سجلنا حرق إطارات في بعض الشوارع، ولا نعتقد أن أجهزة الأمن هي التي حرقت الإطارات. سحبنا بعض الطواقم من منطقة الجيزة عبارة عن أنباء وصلت لنا بأن هناك متفجرات أو قنابل موضوعة بجانب إحدى مراكز الشرطة وإحدى مراكز الاقتراع، ومع ذلك لم يثنينا ذلك عن مواصلة عملنا. أوصلنا توصيات، وكان لنا حظوة مع الإعلام المصري والعربي للتواصل بكل حرية، ولم توجه لنا انتقادات. مع العلم كان للمراقبين مواقف حادة إذا أخذنا المقاييس السياسية للأنظمة الدكتاتورية فلم يكن ليسمح لنا بهذا. في أدبيات عمل اللجنة العليا للانتخابات لم يكن مسموح كتابيا لنا كمراقبين دوليين بالتصوير داخل اللجان أو خارجها، ومع ذلك جزافا قمنا بالتصوير في كل اللجان ولم يمنعنا أحد. نسجل أن اللجنة العليا للانتخابات في مصر قدمت لنا كل التسهيلات ولم تمنعنا من التواصل بالمواطنين، ولا نتفاجأ بالنتيجة، ولسنا هنا بصدد محاباة الحكومة أو الدولة المصرية. النتيجة كانت شبه منطقية أو أكثر من منطقية، لأن الطرف الآخر كما يعلم الجميع قاطع عملية الاستفتاء. قامت الشبكة الدولية بتقديم مجموعة من التوصيات، منها 1 مراجعة وتعديل قانون الاحتجاج، حيث يجب على الحكومة ضمان حرية التعبير والتجمع وتكوين الجمعيات، ويجب على الحكومة النظر فورا بتعديل قانون الاحتجاج للتأكد من أنه لا تقييد للحريات المنصوص عليها نفسها في الدستور الجديد. تعزيز المشاركة السياسية للفترة التي تسبق الانتخابات المقبلة، وهنا نتكلم عن الانتخابات البرلمانية والرئاسية أو الرئاسية والبرلمانية. تعزيز الإجراءات الانتخابية لتكون أكثر تناسقا مع المعايير الدولية. لا يجب أن ننكر أن مصر مرت في ال3 سنوات الفارطة بظروف صعبة، وأثناء الحكم السابق لثورة 25 يونيو مصر تبقى إحدى دول العالم الثالث. اقترحنا، وهو اقتراح مسجل ومثبت في الدستور الجديد، باستحداث هيئة مستقلة للانتخابات لتجاوز هذه الفروقات في التسيير والأداء. توفير تدريب أفضل للقضاة والعاملين في مراكز الاقتراع. حماية الحقوق الدستورية والتي نص عليها الدستور الجديد. تعزيز المصالحة السياسية. نحن كمراقبين دوليين نضع نقاط وتوصيات، ولكن ليس لدينا الحق في التدخل في الشأن السياسي المصري، فهذا شأن خاص بالمصريين، هم الذين يقررون. ولكن للحفاظ على الشفافية والمصداقية قمت وطلبت من المؤسسات الدولية ال6 اجتماعا مسبقا قبل الاستفتاء بيومين، واجتمعت بمسؤولي منظمة كارتر ولترانسبارون منظمة الشفافية الفرنسية، واقترحت عليهم أن يكون لدينا عمل مشترك عبر استمارات يأخذها مراقبون حتى لا يتم التشكيك أو التخابط بهذه التقارير. وكان هناك توافق على طريقة العمل، ولكن الحجم العمل الذي قامت به الشبكة الدولية كان أكبر بكثير من إمكانيات منظمات أخرى. حضرت 4 أو 5 مراقبين. وأخيرا بعثة الاتحاد الأوروبي في القاهرة التقيت بمسؤولها ولم يريد، أو مسؤول فيها ولم يريد أن يذكر اسمه، وفاجأني ببعض المعلومات الخاطئة، وقلت له نحن نعمل على الأرض منذ أيام ولم نشاهد أحدا منكم يعمل وأنتم تصرحون. بعثة الاتحاد الأوروبي في القاهرة تتضمن أكثر من 200 موظف. هذا طاقم يسمح لها بأن يكون لها أعين وانتشار ومراقبة. سجلنا شيء عجيب في كل الدول التي يحدث فيها انتخابات أو استفتاءات بما شابه استفتاء 14 و 15 يناير في مصر، كانت تقوم السيدة أشتون في أول يوم بقراءة بيان الاتحاد الأوروبي. في حالة الاستفتاء في مصر لم يكن مفهوم لدينا كمتابعين للشأن المصري، لم يكن هناك أي تصريح إلا بعد ربع يوم. نحن كحقوقيين نحافظ ونهتم بحق الشعب المصري في تقرير مصيره، ولكن نرفض التلاعب السياسي بمصير الدول. لاحظنا ثورة 25 يناير ومعظم الحقوقيين في العالم كانوا سعيدين وكانوا داعمين لهذه الثورة، ولاحظنا ملايين المواطنين المصريين خرجوا في 30/6 ورأيهم محترم، ونترك الخيار للشعب المصري. نساعد الشعب المصري اتخاذ قراره بكل حيادية. لو وجدنا من الفروقات أكثر مما ذكرنا لكنا ذكرناها في مصر وهنا، ولكن يبدو وكما لمسنا أن الشعب المصري مصمم على تغيير الواقع الذي كان يعيشه ما قبل 30/6. لم نرى قوات عسكرية تمنع المواطنين من الوصول إلى صناديق الانتخاب. لم نرى شرطة تعتقل الناس لتمنعهم من الوصول للانتخابات. لم نشاهد. هناك خلاف سياسي؟ نعم هناك خلاف سياسي. هناك جهة مع وجهة ضد، جهة حضرت أو جموع حضرت وجموع قاطعت، لكن في إحدى ملاحظاتنا لاحظنا أكثر من 70% من المواطنين المصريين الذين ذهبوا إلى الاستفتاء هم من كبار السن، يعني أقصد من البالغين والراشدين. كانت المشكلة هي نسبة المستفتين. كان الإعلام المصري يتكلم عن نسبة 70% و80% و60%. كنا صادقين وواضحين حسب استطلاعات رأي من مراقبين دوليين للشركة الدولية. أقرينا بأن هناك العدد تجاوز 20 مليون، وهو نسبة تجاوز 37-38%. وتعرضنا لهجوم بعض الإعلاميين أننا لم نكن شفافين وأن النسبة تتجاوز 70%، إلى أن جاء المؤتمر الصحفي للجنة العليا للانتخابات وأقره وأعلن الدكتور نبيل صليبة أن النسبة أو العدد 20,620,000، وهي نسبة قريبة أو تزيد 1% من النسبة التي أعلنها. هنا نسجل أننا بصدد مساعدة الشعب المصري، وليس الوقوف مع طرف ضد آخر أو تبني كمنظمة دولية حقوقية وجهة نظر سواء من هم في الحكومة أو من يختصم معه. سنواصل عملنا، وإذا وجهت لنا الدعوة سنعود ونعمل مثلما صفق لنا نفس الإعلام الذي هاجم عملنا في لحظة ما، ونفس الإعلام الذي صفق لنا عندما أشرفنا على استفتاء حق تقرير جنوب السودان، صفق لنا عندما أشرفنا أو على مراقبة الانتخابات السودانية والتي نجح فيها حكومة الإخوان المسلمين في السودان. نفس الجهات صفقت لنا واعتمدت تقاريرنا عندما أشرفنا على الانتخابات البرلمانية. نحن هنا لسنا بصدد التلوين ولا نقبل أن نلون أحد. وشكرا.
And now we will go to Mr. Vlasovic, he's a member of the European Parliament, Europe of Freedom and Democracy Group. Prior to being elected at the European Parliament in 2006, Mr. Vlasovic was a senator of the Republic of Poland from 2005 until 2007. Please, we are all delighted to hear your views on each other.
Thank you very much. Since another Romulo Rabia, it means I have to use English. Three points. The past. 3 years ago, we expected new order in Arabic world. The Arabic Spring was a big challenge, not only for Arabic countries, also for Europe. We supported the changes. We thought that it will be the same kind of transition like we had in my country, in Poland, almost 25 years ago. But now we see what we've got now in this region. The expectations were that will be more freedom, that this region will be more stable. But after 3 years, we see that it is not like we expect. What we've got now, we've got serious war in in Syria. This is the first. And in the countries like Yemen, like Mali, like Iraq, the situation is not so good. But also there is Egypt. And Egypt, this is, in my opinion, this is a chance for new order. Why? Last month, what we've got in Egypt, we've got referendum, the first. We've got new constitution, and we've got now new government. And this is the bright side of these changes in Egypt. Of course, there are bad issues like new organization and new parties which not accept this line. There are still clashes and attacks, not only for people from Egypt, but also for tourists. And this is the black side of the situation. And the question, in my opinion, is what will be in the future? What will be in the future? Egypt has a chance, of course, not only for Egypt, but for all region. It will be the country, because this is the biggest country in this region. That Egypt will lead the transition in this region. But of course, the big players like US, like Europe, like Russia, and like China should speak in this case in one way. But what we've got now in Eastern Europe, we've got very big problem because of the Ukraine, because of the changes in Ukraine. And in my opinion, it will be very difficult to have one common view for the situation in Egypt. Of course, my country, Poland, we show all of the world that it's possible to make peaceful transition. Of course, we can share our knowledge how to do this. If someone will only will need to use it, of course, the gates to Poland are open. But if all of the world will not speak in one way, it will be very difficult. It will be very difficult to help to support Egypt on the way for freedom and democracy. But I hope that these changes which were mentioned before, it will help on the good way to Egypt. And of course, this is not a lot of time. Why? Because the black powers are still active, and we see what's going on in Sudan, in South Sudan, in Mali, in Iraq. And if we do not support this transition, these changes, not only in speeches, but in real life, I think that in few months this region could be much more unstable than it is now, and this is the reason why we should support these changes which have been in Egypt, and we should be very quick at this. This is my opinion. This is what we had 25 years in Poland, and it was possible to achieve quite a lot in very short time in Poland. Other countries from the Eastern Bloc, for example, like Bulgaria or like Romania, they haven't these changes, and they still have quite a lot of problems, much more than we have now in Poland. And this is my view that if we would like to achieve something in Arabic, in North Africa and in Arabic countries, we should be very, very careful but very, very quick in action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vasovic, for your short and comprehensive intervention. And now I'd like to, I'm happy to introduce Ms. Sabra Banu, the Director of Gender Concerns International, an international NGO that is very active in the MENA region. And Ms. Banu herself, she campaigned for the first Egyptian female candidate, Ms. Kamal Saadawi, in 2005, and she is well connected with women's organizations in Egypt, and she will be talking to us about observing elections from women's perspective. Ms. Banu, please, and welcome to our roundtable.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On International Women's Day, just 9 days ago, the EU High Representative, Her Excellency Catherine Ashton, expressed that where women prosper, societies prosper. With this notion in mind, I'm honored to be here today to speak about inclusive electoral participation in the context of the upcoming election in Egypt. My name is Sabra Banu, and I am the Director of Gender Concerns International. I firstly wanted to extend my sincere thanks to MP Korhola and the Global Network for Rights and Development for having me here today as we approach the topic of the challenges ahead given the international observation of Egypt's constitutional referendum. Gender Concerns International works towards gender equality with a specific focus on increasing the political participation of women. In 2005, we campaigned for first Egyptian female candidate, Dr. Nawal al-Saadawi. Having undertaken multiple gender election monitoring missions internationally, including many in the MENA region, we hope to undertake a future mission in Egypt. Thus, GNRD's findings are warmly welcomed and will be considered in our future projects. I would like to praise all the wonderful work you have completed in Egypt. With MP Korhola here today, I would like to also acknowledge the European Parliament for their constant support to also our organization. On 8 March, in coordination with the European Union, we launched our Dastur project in Libya, focused on achieving gender-inclusive constitutional drafting and implementation. This occurred on the 103rd International Women's Day, which had the theme of inspiring change. This theme, inspiring change, permeates through the entire MENA region as countries continue to transition into democratic states. After the Arab Spring, our organization has had an increased focus on the MENA region. As democratization occurs, there is a real chance for change to achieve gender equality in these nations. Timing is crucial. Essentially, women's participation is imperative in a stable democracy. Only with the equal representation of men and women can gender-related issues such as discrimination, childcare, education, political representation, rape, domestic violence, and divorce law be addressed. A gender-balanced society is a strong, prosperous, and fair society for all. Therefore, with the upcoming elections in Egypt, it is highly important to include women in electoral processes. 2011, when anti-government protests began in Tahrir Square, women bravely played their part in the protest against Mubarak. The women of Egypt have been instrumental in the revolution, but their equality, namely in the political sphere, is far from a reality. That said, following the failure of the parliament elected in 2012 to make significant women's rights reforms, Egypt was under significant pressure from women's rights organizations. Feminists had seen the election as an opportunity to push for gender equality. In response, Egypt passed a more gender equal constitution into law on 16 January 2013. Gender Concerns International was pleased to see the development of Egypt's new constitution, which will provide increased protection of women's rights. The constitution winning 90% approval is a welcome step to support women's empowerment. The Egyptian Center of Women's Rights issued a statement about the new constitution, calling it a victory for women's rights. These 2013 amendments include Article 6 in particular guarantees women's rights to full citizenship. Furthermore, there has been a shift in terms of women's involvement in the decision-making process. According to Article 11, measures will be taken to ensure women are properly represented in representative assemblies and shall guarantee women the right to hold public office and the highest administrative roles in the country, including judicial bodies and authorities, without discrimination. Also, Article 180 clearly stated that women are entitled to a 25% of seats at local councils. This means that out of 54,000 seats, women are to be represented in 13,000 seats across local municipalities. Yeah. However, the real issue relates to how these amendments are implemented. In 2011, I remember being in The Hague hosting a high-level international consultation on International Women's Day with women in Egypt. They were optimistic and enthusiastic about the Women's March that they were attending later on the day. While we waited for news that this event went on successfully, world watched with much sadness and pain that on that very International Women's Day, Egyptian women were assaulted right at the Tahrir Square. Shocked and disappointed, they dispersed, but later these women returned to Tahrir Square to occupy their space as they saw it fit. That is, in the revolution, women's participation was welcome and needed, but then it came to women asking for their rights and for an open democratic space. There was not a tolerance for equal rights. Egyptian women, supported by organized and effective women's rights organizations and civil society, seek the basic rights of involving themselves in elections, not only as voters, but also as electoral candidates, and I would add also as managers of elections, active role in EMDs. This is why inclusive electoral participation is so crucial in Egypt. However, electoral inclusion is a complex and a sensitive issue and requires political consensus and genuine resources. In monitoring elections, as the GNRD has acknowledged, there are various challenges and issues to consider. These include ensuring females are voting and are aware of elections, complying with the national electoral management bodies, and issues surrounding security forces in planning, conducting, and management of the elections. In our previous election monitoring missions in the MENA region, we have found that female voters are not equally represented. In our recent Libyan Constitutional Drafting Assembly election monitoring on 20th February, our electoral assessment team observed significant differences between male and female voter participation rate. In comparison to 2012 general election, Congress election that we monitored in Libya, in which 45% of voters were women, the percentage of female voters has declined slightly. In Tunisia, in 2011, we found that women voted actively, but we recommended that the electoral institution guarantee the parity of men and women. In Morocco, in 2011, we were not satisfied by women's participation in the voting process. We recommended focused awareness campaigns to encourage women to vote. If women are not voting, then democracy is threatened and minorities and women are not represented. Additionally, inclusive political participation needs to be supported by electoral management bodies. These bodies are central to the inclusivity of elections and politics. With various stakeholders invested, we hope these bodies will consider the recommendations of other observer missions and implement changes in the interest of achieving gender equal elections. There are also issues surrounding the security forces in planning, conducting, and managing the elections. Given our experiences in 2012 Libya, we found that prior to the election, there was a slight concern regarding to security and how many security agents would be women. The presence of female security agents in an Islamic context is important to ensure that women voters feel comfortable both physically and culturally. It is especially pertinent in security afflicted areas and to ensure that women are able to be clearly identified under full face ways. Furthermore, there have been many occasions where women in other electoral processes have been subject to electoral violence and harassment by other male voters and security forces. However, we found that in Tunisia, problems with security were kept at minimum. Observers' reports revealed that a high number of female security agents as well as male security agents were present in almost all of the stations. In Morocco, we found that there was a need to include women among security and police officers in the voting centers. These issues of equal female participation, compliance with electoral management bodies, and gender balanced security forces are all important in an Egyptian context. That is the point to be made. Inclusive electoral participation, particularly for women and other minorities, is a clear challenge ahead in the international observation of Egypt's constitutional referendum. Women must be equal in political participation, as the theme of the 103rd International Women's Day expressed on the 8th of this month. Women can inspire change. They are catalysts for change. Change to ensure women have a political voice. Change to ensure engagement in a strong women's and civil society movement. Change to achieve equality, justice, peace, and development. In the revolution, Egyptian women's voices were strong, and this voice must continue to loudly resonate throughout Egypt's democratic transition and as the constitution is implemented. In the pursuance of democracy, gender equality is crucial because all voices must be heard. Looking towards the future with optimism and hope, we can work together to achieve our common goal of a gender-inclusive electoral participation in Egypt. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Van. And now we have Mr. Nagin Musleh. He's the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Arab Republic of Egypt in Brussels since 2009. Mr. Musleh will give us the official stance of the Egyptian embassy today. Mr. Musleh has started his diplomatic career at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Egypt in 1993. He represented Egypt in Australia and Sarajevo and many other places. He has also extensive research experience in human rights, international politics, and security. Mr. Musleh, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation, Honorable MEPs, Ms. Korhola and Mr. Bolsovich. I will have a very short speech, given that we are lagging a little bit behind, but I will focus mainly on 4 points. The changes that were made in Egypt in the last 3 years and the challenges, the new constitution, the EU, and the way ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, the changes that were made, what we need to do to assess them is to do the math. In 3 years, we had 2 revolutions, 4 presidents, 6 governments, and 2 constitutions. This in itself should give you an idea of the challenges that we were faced. On the 25th of January 2011, the people wanted to bring down the regime. They did not want to bring down the country. They wanted to bring down the regime. A dictatorship that were ruling Egypt for 30 years. It was quite difficult, and it still is, to make those changes, to face the security forces, to make the cultural and societal changes in such a short time. The road to democracy is not easy and it is not short. This is what history tells us. It was not easy nor short in Eastern Europe, nor in the Arab countries. Will it be? When we had our revolution, our first revolution, it was quite interesting to see and note the reactions of many countries and regional organizations. Looking at the literature, I hardly found any country that called the Mubarak regime a dictatorship. Of course, after that, everybody was visiting Tahrir Square and taking pictures. But, ladies and gentlemen, we need to tell the truth about our positions. We need to be consistent with our positions. It is easy to call it a dictatorship right now. Everybody will applaud you. We had our revolution, the first one, in January, against all the odds and against the position of many powerful countries and organizations that were supporting Mubarak. What are the challenges? How is it easy to face those changes? A dictatorship, a political dictatorship, and then less than 2 years after, a religious fascism. The Egyptian people do not have to choose between 2 evils. No. We can have our own way, with the support certain friends and partners. Hopefully, we are willing to open a new page with all our partners who are supporting Mubarak for decades. And we did, actually. We can forgive, but we don't forget. It is difficult. Let's talk about the challenges. Do we have the culture of democracy? We don't have the culture of democracy. We don't have the institution. Ms. Korhola, you're absolutely right. We need your help. Our institutions for 30 years were weakened. The people themselves, the education system, is quite a disaster. We don't even have the culture of differing with one another while respecting the other. We don't have either the culture of compromise. What the revolution brought, what the two revolutions brought, an infant democracy. We learn from our mistakes, from others' mistakes. We try to benefit from the help and assistance of others, but we still have those challenges. The thin line between freedom and chaos was not very clear. The thin line between rights and responsibilities was not clear either. And we still have to go through this difficult path to implement our roadmap and our way to democracy. We need friends. We need partners. We don't need donors. We need the experience. We need the assistance. We need the help of many others to implement the people's views, the people's choice of a new democratic system. On the Constitution, I will not talk much. I think Ms. Korhola and Ms. Pano, they just expressed the strength and parts of the weakness in the new Constitution. A perfect Constitution does not exist. Still waiting to see. But, like Ms. Korhola, if I have to choose, I will choose easily the second Constitution. We have more rights and freedom. Religion does exist in the Middle East and in the Mediterranean. This is why it is very difficult to maintain the values and principles of religion and to establish a civilian system. The challenges of implementation are not small nor limited, but we have to go through this path. There is no contradiction between Islam and democracy, but we still have to work on making the differences between the values and the principles of Islam on one hand and the rights and responsibilities according to the law on the other. Now let's talk about the EU. The EU has been Egypt's partner for decades, with all the ups and downs in the relations. We took note of the EU position and reactions to all the events that started on the 25th of January onwards. Yet, we do not agree with all the positions taken by the EU. But as partners, we learn to differ and respect each other and accept advice and assistance and help. Yes, we do need the assistance of our partner in the European Union. We do need technical assistance. We do need help in recovering the assets of the previous regime. We have started this process more than 3 years ago. I do welcome the decision of the European Parliament concerning the asset recovery and look forward to the implementation of the decision and the recommendations put by the Parliament to the EAS and the European Union. We do need the help of the EU in upgrading the education system. We do welcome observation of elections. The first observation team was a technical one, I think consisting of 4 or 6 observers. Now we're looking at a full-fledged observation team. The EU is and will remain our partner. And as I said, we did open a new page with the EU as a partner and as a friend. We hope that the EU and other partners will help Egypt implementing the roadmap, implementing and attending the objectives of our revolution on the 25th of January. It got rid of dictatorship, and our second revolution of the 30th of June, it got rid of the fascist religious regime. I would stop here. I would thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Musleh, for this. We all were inspired by the Egyptian revolution in January, and we keep watching closely in Egypt. And now we will open a short discussion. If you have any questions to our panelists, please say your name, your organization, and go ahead. Any question? Yes.
Better now? Yeah. Hello, my name is Kubagoleski. I'm representing an environmental and human rights organization called CE Bangladesh Network. I'm responsible for the coordination of the MENA, which is North Africa region. Thank you, distinguished speakers, especially representative Egyptian Republic. I admired the effort to call a spade and say that the previous regime was dictatorship. But I also noticed that in the same speech you said you called 2 revolutions. One, the revolution on the 25th of January, and the military coup revolution. I think if we are honest, Egypt was without a parliament since 2013, summer, and there is no democratic partner to talk to. At the same time, I work very closely with civil society organizations in Egypt. They are both mostly brave women, but also brave men who are risking their life daily, fighting for freedom of expression, fighting for women's rights, fighting for a better future, and the demands of a revolution, which is also social justice, one of the concerns of the revolution. And they are both critical with the previous regime and the current regime. I don't want to take away anything with any faults from the more.
Excuse me, but the regime, it could be
Yep.
shorter and to
Now
the
I
point.
have
We don't have time.
2 questions, maybe 3 questions. I would like to ask you, how are the virginity tests that are now appearing more and more, especially in Egyptian prison, a sign of quality treatment in the constitution? Because I do agree, the constitution is one thing, and the enforcement of the constitution is very much the other one, and I think this is also what we talk about. To the EU representative, we have two powerful instruments in the Europe, which is European Investment Bank and European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the institutions we control. They have been lending to the previous regime of Mubarak, and the Egyptian people are still paying all these debts. So I have a question here, isn't our role as Europe helping, just as I'm coming from Poland, so just as the Central Eastern European countries were cut some of the debt at the start of the transformation, the Paris Club and the London Club, isn't it the same honest approach from the European institutions, the full control of European banks, to cut off some of the debt to make the transformation easier for Egyptian people? And the last one.
Okay, thank you very much.
The last question, if I may, how is the
It's already time for
of the 15-year-old boy who's carrying a Morsi ruler a sign of respecting freedom of speech and the freedom of political choice? Thank you.
Okay, I think let's go to Mr. Musleh to respond to the first question, then Ms. Eija-Riitta Korhola for the second.
Thank you for your questions. As I said, we need to learn to differ and respect each other. So on that one, we differ. I do see it as a revolution. On the 30th of June, with 15 to 20 million people in the streets. You see it different, but because our references are different also. We have an established democracy, like you, but we do have an infant democracy. We do not have impeachment mechanism. The parliament, they serve to represent the people, but when the people themselves go to the street, I think a government should do something. In Europe, in Western Europe, most of the cases, if 100,000 or 200,000 or 1 million people went to the street, the government resigns. In most of the cases. But in Egypt, after 15 to 20 million people, they took to the streets and no resignation. So our references are different. So this is one. The second point, the revolution is still in the making. It has not been accomplished, and you should not apply the rules and principles of established democracy to a country in a state of revolution. Because a revolution, by its definition, is illegal. So, as I said, we differ here. I will side with the 20 million people who took to the streets in both cases. I'm not aware of virginity tests in the prisons. If you have evidence or complaints, please forward them to myself, to the embassy, or hand them over now, and we'll take them up with the authorities in Cairo. As you can guess, not a single person. I mean, no, it is difficult to accept human rights abuses. We will do our part. And as I said, it's gradual. I hope everything is rosy in 24 hours, but it hardly is. So we work together. We need people like you. If you have problems, if you witness something, if you have an advice, all this would be welcome, and we'll take them seriously.
Thank you very much. Could you please put the mic is on? Ms. Korhola?
I find it very difficult to comment on the law issue because I'm not any kind of expert on that area, so I'm reluctant to do that. But on the other issue about revolution, I have to say I agree with the previous speaker. After listening to many Egyptians, I'm as I said earlier, I'm very reluctant to call it coup. Because, and many interesting people like Huda Badran, possibly many of you know her, the leader of Feminist Union in Egypt. She said that she sometimes feels frustrated with the European Union approach because when we think about democracy, we are too much calculative. It's quantitative and not qualitative. And she felt that we were lacking the sense of quality when we were just looking at the bypassing the democratically elected process, and we were emphasizing that the president was democratically elected, but actually this Muslim Brotherhood and Morsi, they were not anymore interested on democratic processes after the victory. They were more interested on political control. And therefore I agree that it was a genuine revolution what happened.
Yes, here we go. I'm Byron Garazania from Global Water Institute. It has nothing to do with this. We do not work into politics, but I'm interested because I have lived in the region. My question is, Ms. Sarah, you've made a lot of references to the Morocco, Tunisia, and so forth. These are opportunity windows we have to take. Now, my question is, if we could go back to the time of King Hussein of Jordan, do you think things could have been different? Because he has been the mediator of the region for a very long time. Do you think this kind of Arab Spring would have been moderated and stopped or prevented? That is my question. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Peebles, and I'm representing the European Neighbourhood Policy Chair at the College of Europe National Campus in Poland. And I'd just like to go back to your remarks considering the comparison with the 1989 revolution of Poland and the model of political transition. Do you think it's feasible to create a pacted political transition and a consolidation period between the Egyptian military and the Egyptian opposition when both sides are so polarised? And obviously if we look at Solidarność in 1989, it was a strong opposition force which could come to power. That's my question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your attention. I would say times have changed. We can't live in the past. There were some role models, but they also had the limitation of the conditions that were then. I think we're all waiting for this spring to become full summer, and as Mr. Musleh said, it is a revolution in making, and it's very, very fragile democracy. We have to be very careful, and we have to give time. There is no formula for one regional figure, and certainly not from gender perspective. We have brilliant women in each of these countries, and yet to have consensus, to have a regional approach on gender perspective for constitutional reform, for participatory democracy is a challenge. We have to understand how long it took for Europe to become a European Union. We can't magic this. We can wish for this, and we can try to give our support. And I think it's very important, as is said in Arab word, we don't need donation, we need expertise, experience. There is a message to understand that people need interaction with people. Money can't buy everything. So it is important to give more space to civil society organizations, politicians, but government-to-government interaction has to be also, in my opinion, very, very, very carefully thought. We need interaction among people, and this is the message coming from our work.
Thank you, Ms. Badal. And now Mr. Masovic for 1 minute.
3 years ago, we, means European Union or Europe, we thought that the transition in the changes in Egypt will be and in other countries from North Africa will be more or less the same like in Poland and different countries in Eastern Bloc 25 years ago. But it occurred that not one regime was replaced by another one. We in European Union we made mistake that we thought that will be the same. But now there is the second, in my opinion, there is the second chance that of course there is different situation. The world is much more complicated because year by year is much more complicated. But I think this is we can find the similarities between this situation. That now Egypt could have the same role like Poland we had 25 years ago in the Eastern Bloc. That they will lead the process of transition in this region. This is my point of view.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masovic. Mr. Ramadan for
أقل من كده بس تعليق صريح قبل أن أنهي بالشكر. اتفق خلال الكلمات وعلى خارج أمامكم مراقبين ولكن من المداخلات لاحظت أن هناك جملة قالها السيد ماسوفيتش ورددتها قبله السيدة كورهولا ومؤخرا أخيرا السيدة صبرا، أن حقوق الإنسان والديمقراطية أفضل بكثير عندما نبتعد عن الإسلام السياسي. هذا ما فهمه الجميع من كلماته. وشكرا.
Would you like to add something before we close the session?
No, I just appreciate this debate very much, and I just appreciate this moment very much, and I'm touched. I'm touched by your I sense the love to your country, and it touched my heart. I really would like to be supporting good governance and democratic process, and we want to be committed to that.
Well, thank you very much. If you have further questions, please don't hesitate to meet with our panelists outside when we will be having drinks and snacks and socialization. Please, if you would like to have further information about the session and the findings and the recommendations, we will outline everything happened here. Don't forget to register to our mailing list, and we will send you all the information. Thank you all for coming.